So today's demo is going to be about pocketci, your second step towards portable CI using Dagger. As you probably know, leveraging Dagger SDK and Dagger modules is something, it's basically the first step towards making your entire CI pipeline portable. And what we mean by portability is that you write the code once and you can run it actually everywhere. You can test it locally, you can iterate on it, and then you can just push it to your CI and have your CI run the exact same thing that you run locally. The thing is that a problem that we found ourselves and that many users actually have also found is that the way that you plug a given event that happens on GitHub or GitLab with a specific Dagger function call, so a call to a specific module, that's still very vendor specific. That's still something that requires you to write, for example, a workflow.yaml file or a GitLab file, like whatever platform you're using, you're going to have to plug the events that happen in your repo to a specific function call in a way that it's specific for that vendor. And like we mentioned, like this is something that we ourselves have found annoyed at. Not necessarily it's like a terrible bad experience, but it kind of removes you a little bit from that flow of writing your module and actually feeling productive to going back to having to write some YAML, having to deal with how a given event gets triggered, and it's very like specific to one CI and then you move to another one and it's going to be different. So we thought if it was possible to basically build a CI solution, a CI platform that is as Dagger native as possible or as like vendor agnostic as possible, right? This project that I'm going to show you here, we did build it with Marcos and we are Dagger employees, but this is something we're doing on our own time. It's not a product that Dagger is actively pursuing at the moment. It's not something that we plan on doing right now. One of the cool things that Dagger has is that it doesn't force you to use any specific platform. You can use Dagger and GitHub, Dagger and GitLab, and whichever other CI system would be. And we intend to maintain that. But with Marcos, we were thinking like if it was possible to build a project that would build a CI experience in the same way that you have with GitHub, but leveraging Dagger in a more native way. So a bit of an overview of what today's workflow typically looks like. You're going to be working on your machine, you're going to be making changes to a module or your code, and you're going to be using Dagger call to test everything that you do locally. When you're confident, you know that it works and that you want to push it, you're basically going to publish it to your repository. Your VCS, GitHub, GitLab, or Git, whichever it may be, it's going to notify an event, a webhook, to a CI platform, like for example, like GitHub Workflows itself or SQL CI. And then the CI platform, the first thing that it has to do is match that event that happened in your VCS to a function call from your module, right? And then you can just check out your code and run your pipeline. So what are we missing today in order to make this a more Dagger native experience? Well, first of all, we need a generic VCS webhook handler, something that understands events that happen on GitHub, GitLab, or any other VCS. Then we need a workflow rule engine, so something that can allow you to say, hey, when a commit happens on this branch, run this specific Dagger function call. Or like when a tag gets created, run this other function call, right? Then you need an environment that has Dagger pre-installed, which is straightforward to do, and then of course, like always, some duct tape that just plugs everything together. So we decided to leverage existing functionality, existing tools actually, that give us the rule engine and the VCS handler, the VCS webhook handler, in a quick way so that we wouldn't have to spend like weeks building that from scratch. And we were trying to play around with the idea of, hey, can we actually leverage Dagger SDK and the concept of Dagger modules to extend an existing project, which is this one right here that we called webhook, and then add some functionalities that would essentially make it just a little bit more Dagger native. So quick overview of what we essentially built. So on the right here, you will see that the blue box that surrounds everything, that's a Dagger module, which is a pocketci Dagger module, and has a serve function that essentially brings up a service that you can just make request to. Inside that module, we leverage the Dagger SDK, and with the Dagger SDK, we're able to start a reverse proxy that receives requests from the VCS, clones the corresponding repository, and then starts a container with the webhook service with additionally the Git repository mounted. Once you have all that set up, you just proxy the request to webhook, and then webhook actually runs the Dagger call for your specific application module. So we have a Dagger module on top, which is our pocketci module, the Dagger SDK, which uses the concept of services, and then runs the proxy and the webhook as a service. And then inside the webhook service, we have the app module that runs the Dagger call. Now, we're not suggesting this as a production architecture, of course. This is not something that we would say, hey, like you should be building your services this way. Absolutely not. But this was honestly, a very fun way, a very quick way of grabbing an existing project that's actually pretty cool and then extending it with something that would really help us, which is basically this Git checkout and some other additional environment configuration we have to do in order to have Dagger available when the webhook runs. And we just did it in a couple lines of code. It was very easy, very straightforward. So it was a cool way of extending a cool project. So how do you interact with this system that we built here? Well, you have a hooks.yaml file. Yes, we still have YAML, but stick around and I'll share an update on that. In this hooks.yaml, we basically specify what we want to run, right? And here we want to say, hey, we want to do a Dagger call. We're going to use the function container echo, and then we're going to pass an argument string arg, which is going to use the commit message that's sent on the payload of the request, right? So now it's time for the demo. First, quick summary. Here's the repository of pocketci. Very experimental, like you see here. Do not run it in production as is. But here you can see, issues, pull requests, and the things that we're working on. Then this is the hooks.yaml file that we're going to use for the demo. So we have a repository that's hooks test. That repo represents, in this workflow here, this is us. We're using hooks.test to work on our code base and just make changes. And this is just doing the exact same thing that we were showing before. And then the final step is configuring your repository so that any commit event that happens in your repo gets sent to your specific installation of pocketci. In this case, we're using ngrok. We're going to point this URL to a local port that's going to run on my machine, because this is a demo and we want to show that it can work that way, right? So let's get started. First of all, I'm going to run on the top left portion of my screen. I'm going to run the pocketci module, and this is basically going to start the service that's going to basically listen requests on port 8080. Those requests are going to be the ones that get sent from the VCS, from GitHub. Now on the right, you can see that I have the ngrok tunnel running with the URL that we configured in the repository. So we should see here requests be showing up from GitHub coming to our service. And now the only thing that we need to do is just make a commit and push it. As you saw before in the hooks.yaml, let me go back to it right here. Basically what we're going to do is call a container echo function. The container echo function simply prints what it receives as an argument. So if I go right here, I can see that container echo receives an argument and then just does an echo of that specific value, right? So if we're able to specify a commit message, then what we should see right here in the left top portion of the screen, we should see that same commit message show up. That means that the Dagger module that's coded in our hooks test repository is the one that gets executed in here, and it should show the commit message that we create. So we're going to do a very empty commit. We're going to do demo from Dagger's community call recording, actually, because this is a recording. So we're going to commit that, and now we're going to push that commit. We should see a request come to ngrok, to the tunnel. There we go, 202 accepted. Everything seems to be working. pocketci is actually doing stuff, and then here we go. This is the module that's in the hooks test repository, and this is the commit message that we basically just wrote. So if we go back here and we go back to Excalibur, let me go to this drawing. Here we can see that we push the commit from our repository to GitHub. GitHub notify us via the ngrok tunnel to the proxy. The proxy then started a container using the Dagger SDK as a service, where inside it, it just mounted the entire content of the repository at the commit that the event happened. And then that repository, due to how the hooks.yaml file is configured, ran the Dagger call function that showed us the commit message that was printed. And with this, we kind of finish up the entire pocketci experience, so to speak. So we mentioned that this is not a production ready, that this is not an architecture that we suggest. Don't go writing your important production logic like this. So what are the next steps? Well, at the moment, we're kind of thinking about them. So you can definitely join us and you can build it together with us. Here's the repository. You can go to it. You can join the discussions and the issues. The biggest next step that we have right now is basically how can we think of a rule engine that is the most Dagger native possible. So how can we make sure that an event that happens on a VCS can match a given function call, a given module call, in a way that removes you the least possible from the context of your Dagger module itself. So join us and we can build it together. Thank you very much.